Emma Taylor woke up early every morning, long before the sun rose. She tied her scarf tightly around her head, grabbed her cart filled with bottles of water, snacks, and handmade trinkets, and headed to her usual spot in the crowded city square. Life wasn't easy for her. Her parents had passed away years ago, leaving her to care for her younger brother, Jake, who was still in school. Her days were long and exhausting. Under the blazing sun, she called out to passers-by, trying to sell her wares. Competition was fierce. Other vendors shouted louder, offered cheaper prices, or had flashier products. Many days, Emma went home with barely enough money to buy dinner. But despite her struggles, Emma had a kind heart. If someone looked thirsty or hungry but couldn't afford her items, she'd quietly hand them a bottle of water or a snack. "We've all been there," she'd say with a smile. Sometimes this meant going home empty-handed, but Emma didn't mind. Helping others made her feel like she was doing something right in a tough world. One particularly hot afternoon, Emma sat under the shade of a tree, fanning herself with a folded newspaper. Her cart was nearly empty. Just a few snacks and one last bottle of cold water remained. She sighed, knowing she needed to sell that bottle to cover her day's expenses. As she glanced around, she noticed a man leaning against a lamppost nearby. He looked pale and unsteady, sweat dripping down his face. His clothes were crumpled, and he seemed lost in the chaos of the busy square. Without thinking too much, Emma stood up and walked toward him. Emma approached the man cautiously. Up close, she could see how exhausted he looked. His eyes were half closed, and his breathing was shallow. "Hey," she said softly, tapping his shoulder. "Are you okay?" The man blinked slowly, trying to focus on her. I think so," he mumbled, but his voice was weak. "Just really thirsty." Emma hesitated. She glanced back at her cart, where the last bottle of cold water sat waiting. That bottle was supposed to be her final sale for the day, the one thing standing between her and another night worrying about bills. But looking at the man's pale face and trembling hands, she pushed those thoughts aside. "Here," she said, grabbing the bottle and handing it to him. "Drink this. You'll feel better." The man accepted it gratefully, gulping down the water like it was a lifeline. When he finally lowered the bottle, some color had returned to his cheeks. "Thank you," he said, his voice steadier now. "You saved me. I didn't realize how bad I felt until just now." Emma smiled faintly. "It's no big deal. Just take care of yourself. Okay?" He nodded, still catching his breath. "What's your name?" he asked suddenly. "Emma," she replied. "Emma Taylor." "Well, Emma, I won't forget this," he said firmly. "You've got a good heart." Emma shrugged, brushing off the compliment. Anyone would have done the same. But as the man walked away, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something about him seemed different. There was an air of confidence in the way he carried himself, even in his weakened state. And though she tried not to dwell on it, part of her wondered if giving away her last bottle of water had been a mistake. Later that evening, as Emma packed up her cart, she overheard two other vendors talking nearby. "Saw him earlier," one of them said. "That guy wandering around? Rumor is, he's Ethan Cole, the tech billionaire." Emma froze mid-step. Ethan Cole? The same Ethan Cole who owned one of the biggest tech companies in the world? She shook her head, dismissing the thought. Couldn't be. Someone like that wouldn't end up dehydrated in a random city square, or accept help from someone like her. Still, the idea lingered in the back of her mind as she pushed her cart home. What if it was him? Would he even remember her? Little did Emma know, Ethan hadn't forgotten her act of kindness, and he was already making plans to repay it. The next morning, Emma returned to her usual spot in the city square. Business was slow, as it often was on weekdays. She spent most of her time arranging her goods and chatting with other vendors, trying not to think about how little money she'd made lately, or the fact that she might have to skip dinner again tonight. Around midday, a sleek black car pulled up near her stall. Emma barely noticed at first. Cars like that rarely stopped in this part of town. But when the door opened and a man stepped out, her heart skipped a beat. It was him, the tourist from yesterday. He looked different today, dressed in a tailored suit instead of crumpled clothes. His face was calm and confident, but his eyes still held that same gratitude she'd seen the day before. He walked straight toward her cart. "Emma?" he asked, smiling warmly. She nodded, unsure what to say. "Hi. Do I know you? You gave me your last bottle of water yesterday," he reminded her. "I wanted to thank you properly." "Oh," Emma said, blushing slightly. "It was nothing, really." "It wasn't nothing," he replied firmly. "Not many people would give away their last item, especially when they need it themselves." Emma shrugged. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You're wrong about that. And because of you, I'm here today feeling much better." He paused, studying her face. "My name's Ethan Cole. I don't expect you to recognize me, but I run a tech company. Yesterday, you didn't just save me. You reminded me why helping others matters." Emma's jaw dropped. So it was him, the billionaire everyone talked about. Suddenly, she felt self-conscious, standing there in her worn clothes behind a cart full of trinkets. I didn't do anything special," she stammered. "Just doing what anyone should." Ethan smiled. "That's exactly why I'm here. People like you are rare and inspiring. Let me repay your kindness." Emma shook her head quickly. "No, please. You don't have to do that. I was just helping someone in need." But Ethan wasn't taking no for an answer. "Tell me, what's your dream? What would make your life easier?" Emma hesitated. Talking about dreams felt strange when she was used to focusing on survival. "I've always wanted to open a cafe," she admitted quietly. "A place where I can sell food, drinks, and handmade crafts. Somewhere cozy. A space for people to feel welcome." Ethan's eyes lit up. "A cafe, huh? That sounds perfect." Before Emma could protest further, he pulled out his phone and made a call. Within minutes, assistants arrived, jotting down notes and asking questions about locations, designs, and menus. Emma stood there, stunned, as Ethan explained that he'd fund everything, from renovations to supplies. "This is too much," she whispered, overwhelmed. "It's not," Ethan said firmly. "You reminded me of something important. Kindness creates opportunities. Now let me create one for you." For the first time in years, Emma allowed herself to hope, for more than just getting through the day. This simple act of giving had opened doors she never dreamed possible. In the weeks that followed, Emma's life transformed in ways she could hardly believe. Ethan kept his promise, and soon a small storefront in the heart of the city square was being renovated into the cafe of her dreams. The space was warm and inviting, with large windows, cozy seating, and shelves displaying handmade crafts from local artisans, including some of Emma's own creations. At first, Emma felt uneasy accepting such generosity. "This is too much," she told Ethan during one of his visits to check on progress. "I don't want you to think I helped you just for this." Ethan chuckled. "You didn't help me for anything. That's why I'm doing this. You reminded me of what truly matters. Kindness without expectation." Emma nodded, still unsure how to process it all. But as the cafe began taking shape, she realized this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about creating something meaningful for others too. When the cafe finally opened its doors, word spread quickly. Locals flocked to see the charming new spot, drawn by the smell of freshly baked goods and the friendly atmosphere Emma cultivated. Her younger brother, Jake, helped out after school, learning the ropes of running a business while earning money for college. But Emma didn't stop there. Inspired by Ethan's generosity, she decided to use the cafe as a way to give back. Every Friday, she set aside free meals for homeless individuals who passed through the square. She hired struggling vendors to work part-time, teaching them skills they could use elsewhere if they chose. And she hosted workshops where young entrepreneurs could learn about starting their own businesses. One day, as Emma served coffee to a group of tourists, Ethan walked in unexpectedly. He smiled when he saw how busy the place was. "Looks like you're making quite an impact," he said, sitting at the counter. Emma laughed nervously. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "You did plenty before I came along," Ethan replied. This is just proof of what happens when kindness meets opportunity. Their conversation turned to bigger ideas. Inspired by Emma's efforts, Ethan announced plans to launch a foundation supporting grassroots businesses like hers. "We'll call it the Ripple Fund," he explained, "because acts of kindness ripple outward, and yours started it all." Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she managed to say, "for believing in me." "No," Ethan said softly. "Thank you. You reminded me that success isn't measured by wealth. It's measured by the lives we touch." As the months passed, Emma watched her cafe become more than just a business. It became a hub of hope and connection. Strangers became friends over cups of coffee, and struggling families found support through her programs. Even tourists left with smiles, touched by the warmth of the little cafe in the bustling square. Through it all, Emma remained humble. To her, none of this was about fame or fortune. It was about showing people that even the smallest acts of kindness could lead to extraordinary change. And deep down, she knew her journey was only beginning. The success of Emma's cafe didn't just change her life. It sparked a wave of generosity that spread throughout the community. Inspired by her story, people began finding their own ways to give back. What started as one woman's simple act of kindness had grown into something much bigger, a movement fueled by compassion and gratitude. Emma made it a point to hire locals who were struggling to find work. There was Maria, a single mother who'd been laid off from her factory job, and Sam, a college dropout trying to figure out his next step. Both found purpose at the cafe, learning skills they could use to build better futures for themselves. Every Friday, Emma set up a table outside the cafe with free meals for anyone in need. At first, only a handful of people showed up, mostly homeless individuals or low-income families. But soon, volunteers joined in, bringing extra food and supplies. Some even stayed to help serve, turning the weekly event into a community effort. Word of Emma's initiatives reached neighboring towns, inspiring others to start similar programs. A group of high school students began organizing fundraisers to support local shelters, while a retired teacher offered free tutoring sessions for kids struggling in school. Even small businesses pitched in, donating goods or services to those in need. Ethan stayed involved too, using his resources to amplify Emma's impact. His Ripple Fund provided grants to grassroots organizations across the country, helping them create jobs, feed families, and empower underserved communities. He often credited Emma as the inspiration behind it all. "You're changing the world," Ethan told her during one visit. "And you're doing it because you understand the value of kindness." Emma smiled, shaking her head. "I'm just doing what feels right. You taught me that paying it forward matters." Through it all, Emma remained grounded. To her, none of this was about recognition, it was about making a difference. "I didn't do anything special," she often said. "I just helped someone in need. That's all any of us can do." What Emma didn't realize was that her actions had inspired countless others far beyond her city. News outlets picked up her story, highlighting how one bottle of water had led to a chain reaction of kindness. People across the country began sharing their own stories of generosity, proving that compassion knows no bounds. And through it all, Emma stayed true to herself. A humble street vendor turned cafe owner who believed in the goodness of people and the endless possibilities of paying it forward. Years later, Emma stood behind the counter of her bustling cafe, watching sunlight stream through the windows. The space was alive with chatter, locals catching up over coffee, tourists snapping photos of the handmade crafts on display, and children laughing as they colored at a corner table. It was everything she'd ever dreamed of, and so much more. Her younger brother, Jake, now worked alongside her, managing the business side of things while finishing his degree in business administration. "You've inspired me to do my part," he often said, grinning. "Maybe one day I'll open my own place." Emma's work had also caught the attention of national media. Articles about her journey appeared in magazines and newspapers, highlighting how one act of kindness had sparked a movement. People from all over the country visited her cafe, not just for the food and drinks, but to meet the woman who'd reminded them that even small gestures could change lives. But Emma didn't let the attention go to her head. To her, success wasn't measured by headlines or awards. It was reflected in the smiles of families sitting together, the laughter of kids enjoying free cookies, and the strength of a community coming together to support one another. One evening, during a quiet moment after closing time, Ethan stopped by. He looked around the cozy space, taking it all in. "You've done something incredible here," he said, turning to Emma. "And it all started with you." Emma shook her head. "It started with you. If you hadn't shown up that day, none of this would have happened." "No," Ethan replied firmly. "I was just following your example. You showed me what's possible when people care for each other." Their conversation turned reflective. They talked about how far the community had come, how empty streets once filled with struggling vendors were now thriving with small businesses, how schools and shelters benefited from programs inspired by Emma's work, and how the Ripple Fund continued to grow, reaching communities worldwide. As they spoke, Emma realized her legacy wasn't just the cafe. It was the spirit of kindness she'd ignited. Countless lives had been touched because she chose to give away her last bottle of water on a hot afternoon. That single act had created ripples that reached farther than she ever imagined. Later that night, as Emma locked up the cafe and walked home, she paused to look at the stars. She thought about the man leaning against the lamppost years ago, the moment that changed everything. Back then, she'd simply wanted to help someone in need. Now, she saw how deeply connected we all are, and how every act of kindness has the power to transform the world. For Emma, the journey wasn't about personal gain. It was about proving that compassion is contagious. By choosing to lift others up, she'd lifted herself, and countless others, higher than she ever thought possible. And as long as there were people willing to share their last bottle of water, the ripple effect would continue spreading, touching hearts and changing lives one act of kindness at a time. If Emma's story inspired you, share it with friends and family. Let us know in the comments. How has kindness impacted your life? Your stories inspire us to keep creating tales that matter,